What's up, guys? Thanks for joining us live if you're here. If not, welcome back to Celios Network on YouTube. My name is Luke, and with me today is my friend Michael Scholer from the New Jersey area. He recently won a League Cup with this Ultra Malamar list that's up on the screen, and I thought it was a great opportunity to have him on the channel finally, since he's a homie, and to have some updated Ultra Malamar content for the channel, since I don't really cover the deck a lot. It's not one of my favorites, but with NAIC coming up, we have a lot of different decks that people are looking for content on. So yeah, it looked like a good opportunity to do that. So Michael, want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, so like you said, I'm Michael Scholer. I live in the New Jersey area. Wouldn't consider myself someone who seriously chased a world invite this year, but despite all that, ended up with 172 points really attending without attending any regionals at all, which I thought was okay. Um, I guess in this area, I'm best known for blinging out my decks, as you see on the screen, and bubbling out of cuts.
Yeah, I put up the picture of Michael's deck instead of a PTCGO format to show it to you guys, since I didn't want to do his deck any injustice, because it is, like you said, blinged out for sure. So we're going to start with going over the deck itself, and then we'll get into a tournament report and talk about some of the matchups.
Yeah.
So we'll start with the core of the deck, the 4/4 Malamar. If you guys don't already know, Psychic Recharge. Once a turn, you can put a Psychic Energy from the discard pile onto one of your benched Pokemon. So tell me real quick why the 4/4 count, and any thoughts on why not a different count of the line.
So I know a lot of the straight psychic variants of Malamar are experimenting with 4-3. It seems like a lot of people are preferring the 4-3. I think that's fine only because they do also play acceleration in the form of Max Elixir. This deck does not run any form of acceleration outside of Malamar, so it's very important to have 2 to 3 on board at all times. So that's kind of the thought process there, just max consistency. When I built this list, it was really just trying to focus on being extremely consistent, as well as kind of channeling the inherent power of the deck, chaining Photon Geyser over and over again. So that was kind of the thought process behind the 4-4 line. And I really wouldn't go down to 4-3, just because if you prize one, you get into awkward situations and things like that.
Cool, cool. And we'll get into more about how I believe your list is built more towards consistency than other lists I've seen, but you already kind of touched on it there.
Yeah.
Next, we have the two main attackers. We have two copies of Ultra Necrozma, which Photon Geyser for a Psychic and a Steel does a base damage of 20 damage, and then 80 more damage for each Psychic Energy you discard, and you must discard all Psychic Energy to use the attack. 190 HP, weak to Fairy. So, two copies of this. Ever want more, ever want less?
No, I think 2 is fine. You know, I think if you find yourself in a spot where you need the third one, you're probably going to lose that game anyway. So, plus there's so many more outs to other attackers in the deck. In this meta, Dawn Wings is super good. Um, the inclusion of things like Mimikyu, which we haven't really talked about yet, I'm sure we will, but that can also return huge knockouts on things like Bulu and in the mirror, and if Buzzwole GX, I know Buzzwole's going towards for the baby Buzz now, but in the event that they do use things like Knuckle Impact, you can even Jet Punch in certain situations. Filch is actually really good too. If you get end low, you can come up with Filch. So no, I would never go more than that, and I definitely would never go less than that, just to tech out the deck more. I think, like I said, I focused on max consistency with this deck, and I've seen things like Beast Ring in the deck. I think I've seen, for Float Stone, other things like that, but I think Beast Ring, in my testing at least, I never found it consistently enough, and that's why Parallel City's in there, which I think is super good against Mirror, even really against Buzzwole too, because they want to load up their bench, with a lot of things that you can, with a well-timed parallel, really set them back a turn or two,
Mm-hmm.
which can be very, very crucial in that matchup. So No, to answer your question, definitely wouldn't go more or less in terms of the Dawn Wings and Ultra count.
Cool. Cool. Yeah, so Dawn Wings, 180 HP, Psychic type. Invasion is kind of like Russian or Stand-In if you're familiar with either of those abilities. You can just bring it from the bench to the active once a turn, so it's a nice Pokemon to slap a Float Stone onto and retreat and cycle through your attackers, get those Psychic recharges hitting the right Pokemon on the bench. Has an attack Dark Flash for 2 Psychic and a Colorless, I believe, or is it 3 Psychic?
It's 3 Psychic.
So it's 3 Psychic, Dark Flash 120, not affected by resistance. And then Moon's Eclipse GX, which is actually a really good GX attack, 180 for 3 Psychic. You can only use it if your opponent has less prize cards than you, and Dawn Wings is immune to all damage and effects of attacks next turn. So tell me about your usage of Dawn Wings in this deck, even though you have a fair amount of attackers. How does Dawn Wings do as an attacker?
Dawn Wings, I think it really depends on the matchup. Buzzwole, I think you wanna go in with it early. Against things like Greninja, you want to go in with it early. It's pivotal, you know, in other matchups where you need to kind of chain Photon Geyser over and over and over again. Even where if you get in situations where you don't have a Float Stone, but you have 2 Psychic Energy or the opportunity to recharge 2 Psychic Energy onto it and still somehow maybe pull off a big Photon Geyser knockout, it's very key. You touched upon it a little bit too. The Moon's Eclipse GX attack, if they're unable to Guzma around it, you really just kind of set your opponent back another turn, and you can usually threaten another knockout on the following turn. So I really love the card in the deck. It just makes so much sense. With Buzzwole going to 4 Baby Buzz right now, I think it's even more crucial because you know it threatens right away. It kind of allows you to keep up with them, that you can continually chain knockouts over and over again, and that they're also you're also resisting their attacks too. So yeah. Dawn Wings is one of my more favorite cards in the deck.
Yeah, definitely a really great card against Baby Buzz. I think a lot of people found out how great it was against Buzzwole decks in general, just the beginning of testing with Forbidden Light. You saw people were instant including 1 in their Malamar decks, and it quickly went up to 2 in a lot of them.
Yeah, I from the beginning never was at 1. Mm-hmm. I thought the card was just too valuable to be, you know, if you prize it, it becomes hard to chain Photon Geyser and things like that. So I've always been at 2. And I again would not go away from that count.
Sweet. Next we have 2 Tapu Lele-GX Energy Drive, 2 colorless, does 20 times the amount of energy between the 2 active Pokemon. Wonder Tag, when you play it to your bench from your hand, search your deck for a supporter card and put it to your hand. Not much to really say about Lele, it's a staple. Did you ever want more? Did you ever think 2 was more than enough?
So 2, sometimes you do want the 3rd one, just if you get in those weird situations where you prize 1 and you need to Guzma with a Lele, you know, Lele Guzma for game, or Lele and for a Sycamore at the end for game, things like that. So you get in those weird situations where you do prize 1. Otherwise, the 2 is fine, because really it's in there just to give yourself another out to the turn 1 Brigette, which I think is fairly important. It's not crucial just because I'm playing the 7 ball searches in the deck. So, you know, even if you're not able to Brigette on turn 1, it's still not the end of the world, because you could typically get out at least 2 Inkay on your first turn. So really the Lele is just in there for, you know, grabbing a supporter. It can attack. I definitely have attacked with it at times. It's not very difficult, obviously, with all the acceleration from Malamar to build up an unexpected Lele energy drive knockout. So the 2 count seems fine. Every now and again you get in those situations, like I said, where you want a 3rd, but it's insignificant, and the list is kind of tight to begin with.
Cool. And so next we have 4 one-of attackers. We have Mewtwo-GX from Shining Legends, Mew from Fates Collide, Giratina promo, not really attacker, more of just a one-off Pokemon inclusion, but sometimes an attacker, and Mimikyu from Guardians Rising. You can go ahead and talk about these 4 singles in any order you would like, and why you include them.
Yeah, so my early iterations of the deck, it was just actually the Giratina and the Mew, I believe. The initial list ran another letter and a third field blower. Those were cut for the Mimikyu as well as the Mewtwo. Mewtwo was added immediately after I lost my win-in at a cup because my opponent Moon's Eclipse GX'd and I had no response to it, and uh, I lost from there, even though I was able to take the first knockout. So, also, I haven't at least seen a lot of Ultra Necrozma lists running the Mewtwo, so it can catch your opponent off guard in the mirror or even against the Psychic version, where they go, oh, I'll Moon's Eclipse, and if you have access to it, it just puts you ahead so much. It's also fantastic, I think, with this version of the deck between Giratina and the Mewtwo. If you have access to both of them, I think that really swings the matchup in your favor. I'm not saying it's like a 100% matchup. Obviously, Greninja can still do Greninja things. However, being able to, if they don't have Choice Band attached, to net them doing 10 damage and healing with Super Absorption as well as doing 60 damage to them,
Hmm.
that card's just invaluable in so many ways. And even against things like Lycanroc, Zoroark, you can definitely still use the Side Strike GX attack to really just kind of catch your opponent off guard.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Yeah, yeah, and
Uh,
I wouldn't bench it unless it was, I was definitely going to be taking a knockout with it. So it
yeah.
did end up in the discard at times, but when it was played, it was definitely very key.
Yeah, it definitely makes a big target for itself on the bench, especially against Zoric variants, since they have those psychic type techs already for Buzzwole.
Hmm.
That Mewtwo can just look like an easy two prizes for them if they can slap down a Mew and Guzma real quick.
Yeah.
It is really great against Lycanroc. It hits the 200 HP perfectly. And another thing I like about this list, just the Pokemon part of the list, uh, a lot of people that I've heard talking about the Greninja matchup versus Ultra Malamar as opposed to Psychic Malamar. A lot of
Hmm.
people assume, a lot of players, that Mewtwo-GX and Giratina have been absent from most popularized Ultra Malamar lists.
Hmm.
And the Mewtwo-GX Giratina combo is kind of what makes Psychic Malamar such a solid matchup versus Greninja.
Yeah.
So I really like that. The Giratina itself gives you a chance against Greninja, and the Mewtwo really, I think, throws it into the slightly favorable to favorable
Hmm.
area. Um, did you talk about all four of the one ups
No,
or just
no.
Tina and
I
Mewtwo?
just touched upon the Giratina and the
Okay.
Mewtwo in regards to the Greninja matchup.
Hmm.
The Mew is also great. You can pivot off of it with free retreat, obviously, and being able to photon geyser for a metal and a psychic and knock out baby buzzes, knock out buzzwoles, because you're obviously hitting for weakness. That's definitely another card that doesn't pull its weight in every game, but the games that it does, it's very clutch in.
Hmm.
And the Mimikyu is also another. It was kind of the 60th card in the deck. I was looking for kind of something that could just catch people off guard. And it was between that and the Clefairy. I ended up settling on Mimikyu because it needs one less energy, and you're
Hmm.
also hitting for weakness on Buzzwole and things like that, which
Yeah.
we all know how popular Buzzwole is in this current meta.
Yeah.
So because if they knuckle impact or you have access to the knuckle impact, you need band with Clefairy, whereas Mimikyu, if they knuckle impact or even if they sledgehammer, and they're at four
Yeah.
prizes, you can return knockout with that. You're also hitting weakness on, not that you would need it with Clefairy, but you're hitting weakness for things like regular Necrozma, and so it's just a really great card in the deck, and it definitely, not necessarily at this cup, but this quarter won me a lot of games. I've stuck with this deck all quarter, and Mimikyu's definitely pulled its weight, and not a card I would consider cutting. Some people could if they want to play around with the list a little bit. There are other tech options, obviously. Steam Siege Hoopa, Pressure Mewtwo. But everything else, as far as Pokemon go, at least, I'm fairly confident in.
Yeah, the Mew and the Mimikyu are pretty nice one prizers for this deck. The Hoopa and the Pressure Mewtwo are awkward here because you also have Steel Energy. whereas in the Psychic Malamar they flow better because they need all Psychic energy. So I would have to agree with you on the Mew and Mimikyu. The only thing I might, if I was going to take out Mimikyu, maybe I'll put in a second Mew, just so I have a guaranteed, like, one prizer to chain, but the Mimikyu is also really nice for the reasons you listed.
Yeah.
Were there any other Pokemon aside from Clefairy that you thought about adding in?
I've gone back and forth, like I touched upon it a little bit, with the CMC Chupa, with the Pressure Mewtwo. Pressure Mewtwo was kind of gonna go in really to shore up my Greninja matchup, but I felt confident enough in the Mewtwo-GX as well as the Giratina, kind of just really making that not like, you know, an 80-20 matchup by any stretch of the imagination, but you know, swinging it enough in my favor that I'd feel confident in a best of one. So I've been pretty confident in the Pokemon lineup. I have thought about changing things, but really the Giratina, the Mew, and the Mewtwo-GX are there to stay. The Mimikyu is the only one that's up for debate, especially as Buzzwole kind of switches to this 4-baby Buzz variant. So. Yeah. You can play around with that a little bit.
So maybe Mimikyu's the flex spot if you're just picking up this deck.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, let's go over to the supporters. A lot of, I'm just looking at the supporters. A few $100 of supporters here. So we'll start off...
We don't think about that.
We'll start off with for Professor Sycamore. I think that's kind of basic for this deck, right? You want for Professor Sycamore. Good to discard those metal energies. Good to draw through your deck.
Yep, absolutely.
3N and 2 Cynthia. I've seen some do 3 Cynthia, 2N. I think it's just really preference. Any big reasons for that, or just that's what you like?
So I've always been kind of under the impression that in reading articles and kind of forming my own opinions that Cynthia doesn't replace N. Despite this deck being super aggressive, there are some games where you're just going to inevitably fall behind because you get awkward hands, or, you know, just your opponent gets off to a really good start and you get off to an average start. So sometimes, especially, you know, with Buzzwole going down to 1/1 artillery lines, and you know, the N can be really clutch. It could put them in really awkward hands and things like that. So that was kind of the thought process there. Cool. Definitely wouldn't you know, kind of scoff at someone if they wanted to change it to 3 Cynthia 2N. It's really just personal preference, and I felt that the 3N was fine.
Yeah, I think it could really go either way with have some logic behind it. With your way to 3N, you have a better chance of punishing your opponent, or maybe banking on I need one extra turn to play this game, so maybe if I get them down to a 2-card hand, even though I'm going down to a 2-card hand, maybe I can win off of it. Whereas Cynthia, I'll go ahead.
No, it's fine. You catch your opponent off guard too sometimes, because, you know, they'll flip through your discard and see 2N in there and think, okay, I'm fine, you know, I'm gonna win this game. And then if you're at 4 prizes and they're at 2 or whatever, and you just pop down the 3rd N, and you can win a lot of games or steal a lot of games just by doing that. So that was kind of the thought process. But again, there's nothing wrong with going to 3 Cynthia and 2N. Yeah,
for sure. I think there's a little logic behind both sides, but I tend to agree with yours. If I have 4 draw spots, I'll usually go 3 and 1 Cynthia, or if I have 5, I'll go 3 and 2 Cynthia. So next we have 3 Guzma. When I'm building my Malamar decks, I always say I'm going to add a 4th Guzma so I can get it consistently, and I never have room. So do 3 Guzma do it for you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely can empathize with you there. There's been games where you have to pitch a couple Guzma early, and you know, you get in these weird spots where you only have 1 left, or, you know, one's prized. So the 4th would definitely be nice, but with running the 2 different types of energy and all the tech options that I've elected for in this deck, there's just really not room for it. You know, there were games where, sure, I did miss it, but again, it wasn't frequent enough where I was like, geez, I really need to retool this list to kind of find room for a 4th Guzma.
Cool.
So 3 was fine.
And then just the 1 Brigette, you kind of touched on that when we talked about Lele. Since you have the 4 Mysterious Treasure and 3 Ultra Ball, do you usually get away with just the 1 Brigette?
Yeah, like I said, it's there for consistency. I know when the Ultra Necrozma slash Malamar archetype kind of came into play, people were going back and forth with, well, is Lily more optimal? Is Brigette more optimal? And I settled on the Brigette because I was thinking, you really kind of want to turn one Brigette and either flood your board with Inkay or two Inkay and an attacker.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really want to be using your ball searches to find your Inkays, only because that limits the outs to Malamars on turn two. So that was why I went with Brigette, because I figured you're either raw Bridgetting, you're opening with Lele in hand to Brigette, or you're using a treasure or an Ultra Ball, as opposed to using 2 to 3 of your ball searches, which just lowers your consistency
Right.
to find the Malamars on the second turn to third turn. So that the Brigette was fine, and again, it's not like something that's like where it's a Zoroark deck where you need to run 3 of it. You have enough outs to finding the Inkays if it's prized, or if you just don't have access to it.
Yeah. It also is just another thing to clunk up the deck, because I think people get so... I know I do. People get comfortable after playing Zoroark decks for so long, and they forget they can't rid their decks of these useless things late game.
Yeah, exactly.
And you don't want to be drawing a Brigette when you need to top deck a Guzma.
No, exactly. And you don't mind it either in there too, because like I said, you're running so many ball searches that you can just treasure it away, and it's almost like a free, attacker or Malamar or Inkay, whatever. So.
So next we have the 4 Mysterious Treasure and 3 Ultra Ball. Mysterious Treasure, discard a card and search for a Psychic or Dragon type Pokemon. It's almost like it was made for this deck. And then the 3 Ultra Ball are classic ball search. So does 7 seem like a good number?
Yeah, so initially, the count kind of fluctuated. I think I started at 4 Treasure, 2 Ultra Ball. And then in talking with you and kind of looking at how other people were building Malamar, I didn't think that the 4-4 line was entirely necessary, because there comes certain points in the game where your ball searches really aren't even that useful anymore, and they're just kind of like, oh wow, I drew another Ultra Ball, or oh, I drew another treasure, and it's like, I really could have used that for drawing something else. So they clunk up the deck. So the 4-3 count seems really fine. There can be an argument made if you want to go max consistency to 4-4, but I think in this particular list, I think 4-3 is fine. Like I said, I know the Psychic variant does run the 4-4 line, but 4-3 seems fine to me.
Yeah, like you said, you make a fair argument that 4-4 might not even be max consistency, because that really, how many of these searches do you need in a game?
Right.
You probably
exactly.
only need maybe 4 to 5 in a given game, and then the rest are just extra for consistency, and that 8th could just be something clunking up your deck that could be that extra draw support or that extra tech card for a certain matchup.
Yeah, exactly, and that's exactly how I felt about it. Don't forget, obviously you can support her into Pokemon. You're not just limited to finding them via ball search. So,
Right.
like I said, I felt like there was definitely a point where they became almost useless, especially as the later stages of the game go on. Again, you're only running 2 Lele, so the odds of having a Lele late game, they can fluctuate depending on what your early board state was looking like and whatnot. So, the 4-3 count was to me, it felt really consistent actually.
Seems good. Next we have 3 Float Stone and 2 Choice Band for our tools. Looks pretty average to me. Anything here? What'd you start out with? How'd you get here? Anything you want to change?
Yeah, the initial draft of the deck ran the 4 Float Stone, and in doing test hands and in playing games in real life and on PTCGO, it actually, again, going back to the same thing that we talked about a little bit, the 4 Float Stone felt a little bit too much, even though it may be consistent. Buzzwole isn't running typically any Field Blower, maybe 1 at the most. I don't think I've ever seen 2, at least not in this quarter. So 3 seemed fine. Sometimes you whiff it if you're Sycamoring and you need to hit it, things like that. But the three was always fine. As far as the choice band go, Two, yes. You could make an argument that there should be a third in there, but to me, you are running a pseudo third choice band in the deck because you're running Beast Energy. So to me, the two was fine considering you're running, like I said, a pseudo kind of third choice band with the Beast Energy.
That's a great point. Next, I'll lump these two together since Field Blower and Parallel City can both remove stadiums, and that's often what they're used for. So we have two Field Blowers and two Parallel Cities. A lot of times the cuts are either cut the Parallel City for an extra blower or cut a blower for an extra Parallel City, something like that. So tell me about the count of two of each and what they're mostly used for, and if you ever feel like they're too much or too little.
So Field Blower, is pretty standard, obviously, tool removal, stadium removal. There are even situations where, you need to get an extra 30 damage on a Dawn Wings to take a knockout on, things like Zoroark or higher HP things, where you can hit for, I guess it'd be 230 with the GX attack, with a band and a Beast Energy on. So you could Field Blower your own Float Stone and attach a Choice Band, Invasion, and do the Moon's Eclipse GX to take an unexpected knockout. So while that situation doesn't really arise every game, there is the option to that. Parallel City, honestly, probably my favorite card in the deck. I know a lot of the Malamar variants are cutting it in favor of things like Beast Energy, but I think the card is just too valuable in what the current meta is. You have your Zoroark decks, you have your Malamar variants, and you have your Buzzwole variants, and all of those things really need a lot of bench space. And what Buzzwole kind of thrives on right now is kind of just they're not really looking to go for one shots, but more two shots. So if you're smart and with the invasion ability, you can spread your damage around a little bit, and then you can even parallel yourself and get rid of the kind of their win conditions late game. So I think the card is really, really good and really something that I would not cut, even though a lot of people are choosing to cut it from their Malamar list right now.
Cool. Excuse me. Then we have a Super Rod versus Stretcher. Was there any thought there?
So Stretcher I think is fine in pure Psychic, just because you're running 9 energy, I think, or 10 energy, whatever they're at right now. With this, you really kind of want to keep two, like a minimum of 2 steel energy in the deck, or at least have access to the 2 steel energy in the deck. So that's why I elected for Rod over Stretcher. It's very rare where you wouldn't have access. Even you can Super Rod, and again with the 7 ball searches, you can Super Rod and kind of still have instant access to those cards that you're putting back in the deck. So I personally felt like it was more important to be able to recycle some of the energies that I might need, especially because they can accumulate even the psychic energies in the discard. So just being able to recycle the energy was the thought process behind Rod over Stretcher.
Great. And then we have one Professor's Letter, The Last Trainer. Makes perfect sense since you have 2 kinds of basic energy. So you want to search out those basic energies sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's busted if you open it in your opening hand, where maybe you have Letter and Ultra Ball, and you could just throw 2 Psychic in the discard right away, and you're basically Ultra Balling for free. Is how I kind of view it. Or there's those pivotal turns where you'll draw it, and maybe you whiff the Steel energy, but guess what? You drew Letter, so you have access to not only Steel energy but another Psychic energy to throw in the discard if you don't have access to it. So. The one was fine. If you wanted, like I said, the initial list did run 2, which was a little bit more consistent, obviously. You found it more when you needed it, but, it was kind of just one of those cards where you don't need it every game. And the turns where you do find it, sometimes it could improve, kind of can swing the matchup.
Cool. And then we have 7 Psychic Energy, 3 Metal Energy, and 1 Beast Energy. I think that's pretty much the standard for the deck. Did this ever change, or is this pretty much how it started out?
Initially, I was at 4 Metal Energy with a Beast Energy. Maybe even, I don't recall. I might even not have had a Beast Energy in the deck because I wasn't valuing the card very much for whatever
Hmm.
reason. The 7 Psychic Energy has always been consistent, though. I've never gone more or less in that regards. Once I kind of saw that the list was becoming crowded, the fourth Metal Energy went away, and the argument for that was that, hey, I'm still running a fourth Metal Energy because I have Beast Energy in the deck now. So um, that the energy count, I think, is right where it needs to be for you to find the cards you need at the right time.
Great, sounds good. So there is the list. Went really into depth on that actually, but I'm glad we got all that out. A lot of information. Like we said, Michael has been playing this list all quarter, and I watched him improve over this list and just work on it monotonously over the quarter. So
Yeah,
he does know a lot about the deck. Let's get into the tournament report for your first place this past weekend.
yeah.
So round
Um,
one.
yeah, round one. It was we played 5 rounds. I think there were like 26 masters or something like that. Round one was Buzz Lycanroc. This was probably my favorite game of the day because you know, I actually don't remember if he was running the 4 Baby Buzz or if he was at 3 Buzz and 2 GX. Um, I think he made a mistake because he was kind of going in with the Buzz GX early, kind of doing 80, 30 everywhere. And he wasn't really taking knockouts though. And I think I went ahead and then he returned a knockout. Um, but so he was spreading damage to a lot of my GX Pokemon, and there was actually a turn late in the game where I think I was down to 2 prize cards, and he was either at 3 or 4. And again, going back to our deck discussion, where I paralleled myself and got rid of a Lele with some damage on it, and a Malamar that had 80 damage or 70 damage on it.
Hmm.
So it was like, or 60 or 70 damage
Yeah,
on it. It was a jet punch away from dying,
yeah.
and he alluded to me, and that was kind of why I made the play. Obviously, he said to me, you ruined my win condition after you did that. I couldn't do anything after that.
Yeah.
So that was awesome being able to do that and kind of really making a nice micro decision to secure the game.
Yeah, so against a lot of decks, that's a safe game plan. Setting up some double knockouts with Jet Punch, stuff like that.
Hmm.
And there's also times where you're not sure if your opponent's running Parallel City or if they're only running one, how many they're running. So sounds good. And from there, I guess you just knocked out a few Buzzwoles.
Yeah, yeah, it was really after that pretty low stress. Just going in with Dawn Wings. Um, you know,
Cool.
that was pretty much that.
Yeah, Dawn Wings does the job. So round two.
Yeah, that was also Buzz Lycanroc. Um, I find that deck so funny. So when I was deciding what I wanted to play for this quarter,
Hmm.
I was kind of under the impression that I was going to stick to one deck and play it for the quarter, given that it was so short. It was between Malamar variant and a Buzzwole variant. I was testing with Buzzwole, and I would open with an attacker and like 5 energy in my hand, and it just have to Sycamore them away, and then things would really get out of control from there. So that's kind of what I believe happened to my opponent in this game.
Hmm.
He got really poor draws. Kind of just steamrolled him. I think he ended up taking 2 prizes, but it was so meaningless at that point in the game. And I was also able to keep his Lycanrocs off the board. I kind of because I think he was running the 4 Baby Buzz list, so he was going in with his Baby Buzzes. But there were certain turns where he wasn't powered up enough to swing around or anything like that. So I was able to Guzma the Rockruffs on the bench and keep them off the board, which I think was key to him not having any kind of comeback against me.
Cool, cool. Okay, so you're 2-0 against two Buzzrocks.
Yeah.
Let's see round three.
Yeah, round three, I got a little bit of revenge. I feel bad on the person that I got it against because I consider him a friend. James is a really good dude, but Bulu was definitely responsible for how poor my third quarter was.
All of our third quarters.
Yeah, exactly. I just like refused to accept that the deck was good and also refused to play it myself. So I really, really dug myself into a bad spot. But he got unlucky. He flipped over his prize cards, and I think he prized something like 2 Grubbin or 3 Grubbin and some other important cards that he needed. He was actually like horn attacking for a good majority of the game.
Oh God!
So you know how that matchup went. I pretty much steamrolled him. He was able to take maybe 2 or 4 prize cards, but I Mimikyu'd him for game. So that was fun.
Nice. That always feels good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
don't play a stage 2 deck. Okay, so you're 3-0 in a 5-round League Cup. Going into round 4, one might think that you wanted to ID.
Yeah, so, yeah.
But you played down, I believe, was this?
Yeah, so there were only 3 3-0s, if I remember correctly, and naturally I was the one that got down paired to a 2-1 in round 4.
Yeah.
So obviously my opponent is not going to ID, so we flip it over, and it's the mirror. Definitely not a 60-card mirror, but...
Ultra versus Ultra, right?
Yeah, he was running weird things like the Duskmane promo and you know, a Mew, I think, were his techs, which I don't necessarily agree with, but that's his choice, and if he liked it, that's cool. He drew somewhat poorly, but in the beginning of the game at least. Then he kind of stabilized and was able to return some knockouts, and I think I might have Mewtwo-GX'd him, and he's like, "Oh, I didn't know you played that, or that Ultra even played this." So I was like, "Yeah, that's why it's there."
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, so I won that game. I think, like, you know, he had 3 prize cards left or something like that, but a pretty stress-free game.
Cool. And then round 5.
Yeah, round 5, again, thinking, okay, I'm 4-0, probably can just ID here again. But no, my opponent at 3-0-1 wants to play it out, and he's playing what I believe was Buzzrock. I didn't really get to see much of it because he got one of those just weird Buzzrock hands that made me never want to play the deck again.
Yeah.
All I saw from him the whole game was a Sledgehammer, Baby Buzz, and a Regirock on the bench. And I set up a Dawn Wings early, took an early knockout, maybe turn 2 or 3 on the Baby Buzz, and then I Photon Geysered, I think, the Regirock or Mewtwo-GX the Regirock, something like that. So I didn't really see much of his list, and the game ended extremely quickly, but I 15 match points. I think I played a little bit more Pokemon than I was expecting, at least in Swiss. So.
Yeah. So top 8 for this tournament, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you're first seed at 5-0.
Yes, I'm first seed at 5-0. I get paired against my round 4 opponent. Game 1, I win just because I think...
Oh, you're round 4 opponent, so this was the mirror again?
Yeah,
okay.
This was the mirror again. I won because, you know, I think I just understood the deck a little bit more, and I think my deck, you know, I'm biased obviously a little bit, but I think my deck was just a little bit more consistent than his. So I won that game pretty convincingly from what I remember. Game 2, I thought I was on my way to a 2-0, and I think he ended me low, and I was just never able to really recover from there to take my like final 2 or 3 prize cards, whatever it ended up being. So that was that game, and then game 3, he played so poorly. He there was a turn where he Mysterious Treasured for what was supposed to be a Dawn Wings according to him, but he benched a Lele and didn't even use the Wonder Tag ability. So that like set him back an entire turn because he had a full board setup of like 3 Inkay and two Lele with no attacker after I knocked him out. So I think he actually ended up scooping to me on like turn 6 or 7 of the game.
Some top cut stress there in game 3.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was just so far ahead, and it was kind of pointless for him to play out. So it was nice to get a stress-free game three out of that series.
So round top four. Top
Yeah,
four. Still undefeated on the day though.
still on.
6-0 going in the top four.
Yeah. I did. Well, I did lose one game. I think I lost two total games, and both of the games were in Top Cut.
Yeah.
I don't know how stats work as far as that goes, but I had myself at 11-2. I think was the total game wins and losses.
Nice.
But top four, I'm playing against Greninja Break, and normally a matchup I think that isn't favorable for any kind of Malamar variant. However, I think based upon how I chose to run the deck and how I kind of wanted to take 50-50 matchups at worst across the board, especially I think it's different when you're preparing for, well, it's obviously very different when you're preparing for a League Cup as opposed to things like NAIC or regionals because, people aren't going to bring, or at least heavily bring, things like Greninja to these regionals and things like that, but you have to be prepared for someone to do so at League Cups. So
yeah, you always have your token Greninja, your token Bulu, stuff like that.
Exactly. There's always the one random guy that if you're not prepared for can just ruin your day. So I didn't want that to happen for me, and fortunately enough, I was prepared for the matchup. So game one, I think I got a little bit unfortunate with my prizing. I was never able to, which looking back at this quarter, I don't actually think I ever really got the optimal setup against Greninja. But given that I was running the Tina and the Mewtwo, you're still able to come back based on that. So, game one, he just won because, I wasn't drawing that great and my deck was kind of crapping out a little bit. So I'm like, great, I'm going to lose to Greninja here in top cut, or top four, excuse me. Game two, get the optimal setup. I get the Mewtwo out early, or the Dawn Wings out early. And I'm swinging, he's really not doing much damage, and it's just a long, dragged out game, which eventually ends in me winning. So this was, ironically, the other top four game had finished like an hour, and we were before, and we were still going, and so we had time called, and now it goes to a sudden death, basically game three.
Ooh.
And I'm like, I don't think there's any way I really lose this because I have so many outs.
He can't even attack until like turn 4.
Yeah, so I was like, I think I basically just win this as long as, some ridiculous circumstance doesn't happen. So I went super aggressive because I was like, I'm not losing this. I didn't have access to Brigette on turn one, or if I did, I wouldn't have had a follow-up on the following turn. So I think I had Ultra Necrozma in hand with like a Psychic Energy in hand. So I was like, you know what? We can find the Metal Energy on turn two. Let's just attach the Psychic because I knew he was running Enhanced Hammer too based on our previous two games. So just in case the Beast Energy came into play, which ironically was what I drew the following off of an N or Cynthia, whatever I played.
Yeah.
And I think I just donked him on turn 3 of the game, so that was fairly easy.
So game 2, when you use the Mewtwo and Giratina to win the game, or using Mewtwo's second attack that heals when it hits?
Yeah, definitely. It's situational. So there's certain points where you could even use, I forget what the name of the first, Super Absorption.
Full Burst is the first.
Full Burst, yeah.
And then Super Absorption, I think, is the second one.
Yeah, so Full Burst definitely can come into play because 90, if you attach the third, isn't terrible. And then obviously attaching the third, you have access to the GX attack too. There are certain points sometimes, believe it or not, where Greninja can maybe go ahead too. And since they don't play things like Guzma, obviously, your Moon's Eclipse is going to be super effective against that deck.
Yeah.
So especially because, if you are taking a knockout, you're not going to go ahead based off of that knockout typically if you're able to use the attack. Well, no, I don't think there's obviously any scenario where you would be able to take an extra prize card. So
yeah.
So the Moon's Eclipse GX attack is very beneficial too. But yeah, definitely just swinging with Super Absorption.
Cool. So top 2, you're going in the top 2. You beat Greninja, the monster.
Yeah, exactly. I got myself one of the stupid Greninja playmats. I was like, it couldn't have been anything else but this. So, yeah, top two. I was actually kind of happy to see Jason because I made a misplay against him a couple of weeks prior to that really cost me an opportunity to play in the cup that you actually ended up winning, I think, at Jinx.
Okay.
So I was happy to see him just to kind of uh, prove to myself that we can do this or whatever. So yeah, he was playing Psychic Malamar as he's been playing pretty much all quarter, so I kind of was familiar with his list. Um, Game one, he prized 3 Inkay, so I think we all know how that went from there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, ironically, he was able to take 2 prizes, and the 2 prizes that he drew were the 2 Inkay.
Mm.
So he was able to make it a little bit more interesting than it should have been,
Mm-hmm.
given that he prized two Inkay or 3 Inkay or
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
it was.
for sure.
But yeah, I kind of, even though the game was close in terms of prize cards, I kind of took control of that game pretty easily.
So you were on the head. You were ahead on the prize trade, pretty much.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
And then game two.
Yeah, game two. We're in this awkward state where we're just kind of like draw passing, I think, because he had a non GX in the active, and I had like a Mew in the active or something like that, and I wasn't able to really find any energy or put energy in my discard if I remember correctly. So it was kind of like if you could just find the Guzma, you would be fine. And I think I ended up finding my Guzma first to go ahead. And at this point, he was down. He had like a 2 or 3 card hand, and he was just draw passing really.
Okay.
So I was able to go ahead, um, and he again was able to come back though. And then at the end of the game, I think he GX attacked me, which put me back a turn,
Mm-hmm.
but I was still ahead enough, excuse me, that the following turn he like Dawn Wings and I was down to 1 prize card, and I had enough things set up that no matter what he knocked out, really, I was going to be able to knock out, and I Guzma with the Mimikyu or whatever it was that I ended up attacking for the game.
Nice.
So yeah, so that was that.
Nice. Well, congratulations on your first place finish. I know you've been chasing that champion
Yeah.
that.
Definitely.
It's nice to get it with a deck that you really put a whole quarter into as well. Yeah, that. So what you were talking about for game one, or game two, sorry, of your top two match, I've actually been in that position in almost every mirror match I've played, in every Malamar versus Malamar variant, where you're just seeing, all right, well, which one of us are going to hit the Guzma first? Because
Yeah, exactly.
you don't want to leave your GX attacker out in the active to take a 1 prize and then
Yeah,
let them not
exactly.
have the GX. So that actually does come up a lot, and it's a good point to note.
Yeah, because I mean, you don't want to go ahead and then just have your GX get blown up. Because I mean, he was powering up things on the bench. I'm powering up things on the bench. Um, it's weird because you can dead draw, but you could still kind of do things with this deck if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
um, we were both kind of doing things on our bench, but not attacking. We were just kind of really hoping to find that Guzma, and fortunately enough for me, I found mine first.
Nice, nice. Well, thanks for being on the channel. It was a long time coming. Do you have any shout outs?
Well, first of all, I mean, thank you to yourself for having me on the channel.
Thank you.
I really appreciate
Thank you
it.
for the shout out.
Yeah, no, our friendship and as well as what you do for the community and everything is great, and I'm glad that I could be a part of the channel.
Hell yeah.
I wanted to shout out just the 2 local game stores that I go to, Jinx Collectibles in Matawan, New Jersey. Um, the staff and my friends there, shout out to all of them, as well as The Only Game in Town. Without them allowing me to spend massive amounts of money on my cards, I would not be able to provide the deck list that is in front of you. And also shout out to Rahul Reddy, who helped me with the list a little bit, and for his coaching services. Definitely check him out if you're looking to improve as a player, because I really felt that with his guidance and teaching, just micro decisions. I felt I was a good player and everything, but kind of refining those skills, definitely give him a shout out.
Yeah, Rahul's definitely a good player. Hope he's a good player this week because I drafted him in my fantasy draft for NAIC.
Yeah, I did see that.
Seemed like a strong pick.
Channel, right?
Yeah. All right, man. Well, thanks for being on, and thanks for everyone tuning in live. If you're watching this at a later date, always, subscribe, like, comment. Check out my sponsor, flipsidegaming.com. Use the 10% off code Celio. And also check out the weekly articles that I write on there. A lot of good content, especially for NAIC, coming up probably in 2 days after this video is uploaded. So a little outdated information for people watching in the future. But thanks anyway, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.